Kia ora. Today I'm going to show you how to create a graph where you can set up the axes for students that you might want to print so they can draw their own graph without having to worry about setting up axes first, which we all know can take a long time. So here I've got two columns of data. This first column is going to be the data on my x-axis, and I put a minimum value of 30 and a maximum of 300. In the column B, this will be the data that's on my y-axis. I put a minimum value of 20 and a high of 70. Now these are just ballpark figures that are going to give your graph a general sort of range on each axis. You don't need all the data in between those points. This just tells the graph essentially what the boundaries will be. Highlight the data completely, hit the Insert Chart button, and then change the column chart to a scatter. And you can see that already it is trying to set up some axes for you based on the numbers we've done. We've got 0 to 300 on the bottom, which is our x, 0 to 80 on the y-axis. Now you can customize that a bit over here. So on the series, the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of these blue points because they're quite distracting. I'm going to make them have no color. So right now I've got a plain graph which the students could fill out. I'm going to go to my horizontal axis and just check the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 300. Hit enter. I'm going to do the same for my vertical axis, make the minimum 0 and the maximum 70. Now maybe my data doesn't start until quite high up. I could make the minimum 20 and start there too, and you can see it truncates the graph. And it's totally up to you, it depends on the data you have. I'm going to keep mine 0 for now. Now to add some more divisions and change the grid lines, I'm going to click on Grid Lines, starting with my vertical axis, which is on the Y. I'm going up in tens, but if I didn't like that, I could change the divisions by just playing around with these numbers here. There's going to 8 until I find divisions that I'm happy with. The divisions that you use will depend on your maximum minimum as well. So I'm going to go back to 10. Yep, see, I think it was 9. There we go. No, it's 8. There we go. Now, it's really hard to plot in between those points without some guidelines. So in the minor divisions, I'm going to add 4, which means now I'm going up in 2s on the y-axis, 2, 4, 6, 8. I could go up in 8, which means now it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's totally up to you, depends on what you're trying to do with your students. On the horizontal axis, this is really blunt, going up in hundreds. So again, I'm going to play around with my divisions here till I find something that I think works for this data. There we go, going up in 50s now. I'm going to change my major divisions now, so I'm going to go up in 10s. So if I added 4 lines in between, every line would be worth 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So now you can see I've got some axes good to go. Now at this point, if I wanted to add an axes label to get my student started, go to Chart and Axes Titles. Maybe on the vertical, I'm going to add a label. I'm going to call that temperature and just hit enter, and there it is. Now that might be a clue for your students on where they should be referencing their points from, but this is temperature, not this axis. Still gives them the chance to add in other labels and units to show they understand. Now I want to get that printed, so into a blank document here, I'm just first of all going to put a table with 2 rows. I'm going to highlight them and center everything in that table. I'm also going to change the table to be the same color as my paper. So now it seems to be invisible. In the first cell here, I'm going to go Insert Chart from Sheets. Now this is the latest sheet I was working on. It knows that. So Google Drive has detected that. Click Select. It'll scan that sheet for charts. That's my only chart I have. Click Import. Now this is a linked graph that is always checking this sheet for changes. Come down to the next cell. Whoops, there it is. And I'm going to go Insert Chart again. And this is just a nice way to space out the chart on the sheet if you're going to print them and then cut them in half. Now, if I go back here, I've just realized I don't want temperature. Double click the graph. I'm going to go to Customize, Chart and Axes Titles, get rid of temperature. I actually want the bottom axis, the horizontal, to say time. So now that's happened, right? I've fixed up my graph. Now over here, it says update. It knows that the graph has changed. If I click update, it will update the graph in the new format. It's a much better way than copying and pasting. Copying and pasting cuts the connection between the paste and the original graph. And that means too that you could tweak your activity over time, and then any documents you've got that are linked to that will also be able to update. In fact, if I had not clicked update and I had shut the document down and then reopened it, it would update as soon as I reopened. So that's pretty handy. So there we go. That's how you print axes on a graph for students to fill out by hand.